So, you know how Jordan Peterson break things down and then put emotion in words, very much like a Kepler Rousseau of whoever do the death circle thing. So what is the, so people experience that nonetheless. So what is the benefit of knowing that in words?
Can you say that again?
So I guess it's, you know, whatever the emotion or whatever the process, people go through it anyway. So what is the benefit of seeing it in words?
Let's say, for example, you say, Amir, I'm angry. I don't know why I'm angry. Or maybe you just know you're angry. And someone says to you, well, did you know that anger has history in it? You say, history? Well, what do you mean? Well, history is a series of events that are experienced and interpreted. Sometimes it takes 2 months, sometimes it takes 2 years, sometimes it takes 20 years. It begins with an experience that you feel negatively about. That experience gets repeated over and over and over again. And the feeling turns into an emotion, you know. See, sometimes you can come here and I can make you feel bad about maybe just the way I am. I talk too much, or I talk too little, or maybe I'm very poor in explaining things. And you say, this is not the best experience. This is for me tonight, for example. But you come back next week and the following week. But when you have an emotion, it kind of tells you, he has one good night and 10 bad nights. Do I want to go there and try my luck? And if you happen to be an intelligent woman, you say, no, I'm just going to stay home. Okay? And so you say, I'm just never going to go to his house again. You know? And then someone asks, well, do you hate everything, or do you just hate that specific thing? And the point I'm trying to make is, it's kind of like a recipe as to how you make anger. I think as long as you have the recipe, you can kind of sit back and observe how this thing snowballed. It just kind of guides you a little bit, helps you a little bit, as opposed to being completely in the dark, just saying, I am angry, period. Let's just say, for example, that you go to San Jose this weekend and you don't have the best of times. Okay. If you had done your homework as to what relationships are, what they do, how they function, the complexities between a man and a woman, the woman with herself, the man with himself, and all of a sudden the two of them come together from different cultures, the difficulty of language, how passions come about, how expectations come about, how imagination, all that stuff come about. Then when you go out there and things don't go your way, it's not going to come to you as a complete surprise. And that's very, very helpful, because you understand. And I think all of life really is about that. Things happen, you're put in a very uncomfortable position, and then you want to go back and figure out what recipe was in play. What sort of components existed for this to happen this way. And it's always good to have clarity, and it's good to listen to someone like Jordan Peterson. Because I think, unlike most teachers like Moji and Tola and all those people, they kind of just give you an anecdote, and tell you a story and say, okay, go off, go over there and sit down and figure out what the story is. He doesn't do those things. He kind of just breaks things open very carefully and precisely, and then Part of it has to do with his own temperament, an introvert. He likes sadness and depression. That's just, I think, I may be wrong. And he had been in the classroom for many, many, many years, both as a professor and a therapist or a psychologist. And when you deal with people who have issues and you see them on a daily basis, you can't just give them fluff. If you're honest about your work, you really want to go in there and understand, kind of like Freud to some extent, why is it that people have mental issues? What happens to them? How do they break? Why is it that they can't be put back together? And to be able to do that, you need to exercise also a good amount of detachment. You can't just, swim in your emotions and just feel good or feel bad. It gets just repulsive after a while. You have the power to kind of sit back and observe and reflect. And I think you owe that to yourself. And if you don't know what the steps are, watch Jordan Peterson to gain some clarity. If nothing else, at least you can mimic, copy the way he speaks. And that in itself, I think, is valuable. It's what we say to children all the time. Use your words. You learned a couple of words yesterday, use them. Don't just cry, tell me what the hell is going on. So.
May I?
Sure.
My apologies, I keep repeating the same question.
And I've been saying the same thing for the past 30 years. I should apologize to you again, not you to me.
There was one time you made a comment saying that we should only read the four Gospels when there are certain feelings. So, but if we want to understand, go beyond feelings to understand, isn't there need that detachment?
I think to create a relationship and to make that relationship be constant, you need a good amount of emotions at the beginning. If you go out on a date and you keep saying to yourself, I wonder what his past is. I wonder how many other men or women he's gone out with. I wonder how much money he's got in his savings. Did he have a good relationship with his father, with his mother? Well, those are too many questions for a single lifetime. So what you do is you kind of say, oh, I like the way he drinks his coffee. Right? I like the way he's wearing his glasses. I like his mustache. I like the fact that he works at Google. I like his shoes. I don't know. Just things that just emotionally excite you. And then you spend a lot of time, and then you just start thinking about the guy all the time. And then you take the bait. So once you have the bait, once you've been caught, there is no escape. Okay? Now you're held in bondage. Now that you can't escape, how are you going to survive the relationship? Because every time he just looks away, you can't just kind of start crying. Every time he does something that's unpleasant to you, you can't start screaming and crying. That's annoying, So what you do is, and you can't leave the relationship because you're attached. Now your reasoning powers come into play. You say, okay, well, now I know that he doesn't like korma sabzi, okay? And he doesn't like chow mein, okay? He only loves bread and cheese. If emotionally you would be hurt after having spent like 20 hours in the kitchen, and he happened to be someone blind, says, "Oh, you made korma sabzi? I hate korma sabzi." Yeah, but I was in the kitchen for 20 hours. It's too bad for you. I hate it. You know. And then you just pack up your stuff and drive back to Oakland. You know. But after some time, you kind of say, okay. So initially, when you read the Gospels, a good amount of emotions are necessary. You can't be objective. In fact, it's poison for you. Once you're attached, then if you can, which is usually impossible, because you become addicted to just emotions are at play all the time. And when you don't have emotions, you kind of miss them and you want emotions. And then you kind of paralyze your ability to think and reflect about things the right way. You need someone from the outside to silence your emotions and activate the way you think. Or you should think. You know. But you should never go into anything with let me correct that. You should not approach the New Testament through rationality initially. You should be consumed by them. You know, swim in this ocean of emotions. It's chaotic. And there comes a point where you kind of just find an equilibrium. And then you say, okay, let me now move into understanding. You know, I remember that in the Gospel of Matthew, for example, Matthew talks about lineages, family tree, that Joseph was son of Moses, and Moses was son of Joseph, and Joseph was son of Joseph. And initially when you read, it doesn't, it says, I want like a nice story from Jesus. What the hell is this? And once you become mature in emotions, you say, well, what is that? Why does the book start with that? And then someone says, because it's a Jewish gospel, because they want to tell you that Jesus comes from the Jewish tradition. He has his roots in Abraham, and then that becomes interesting. And the next time you go to the classroom, you can kind of inject a good amount of emotions into that understanding, and then the audience will have the benefit of not only experiencing the emotions, but also the understanding, And that's also something you get when you watch the early stages of Jordan Peterson. You have a man who is intensely private, intensely emotional, and profound in understanding. He gives it, some Western slant, which is okay. But, yeah, I think if you were to approach any relationship initially rationally, it wouldn't work. And in some ways, it's a cruel joke. First you fall in love with a guy, then you realize he's a serial killer. And then you want to fix him. Wow. Because that's not the first question you ask when you go on a date. How many wives have you had?
How many did you
kill? How many did you kill? How many kids did you put in foster care? None of those things.
Oh my God.
And I think that's the way we deal with everything in life. First you purchase the item because it looks good. And then you have to figure out where you want to put it because it doesn't fit anywhere.
Wouldn't it be smarter to apply ration first?
Yeah, in the beginning.
Like with online dating, you can filter out all of the serial killers. Isn't that helpful?
No, you can't.
I can't lie.
I'm not going to even talk about my husband who I met online.
Is it just impossible
To what?
to apply ration at first in anything you do?
Or do we get hijacked with our emotion?
Well, I don't think we're wired to exercise because rationality or observation requires detachment, and we're not the sort of creatures that begin life with observation or detachment. I mean, from the moment you're born, 10 seconds later, you want your mom to hold you, you know, and then you're just connected to her for the next like decade, you know, and then you get attached to your bike, then you get attached to your cell phone, then you get attached to your shoes, then you get attached to your friends. And in all these attachments, there's a good amount of jealousy that's involved, fear of loss that's involved, anger that's involved, expectations involved. It takes you a long, long time to say, okay, I want to kind of figure out the reason for attachments, why we have friendships, you know. And at that point, then you can kind of remove yourself from just being an emotional junkie to stand outside and examine, you know. And I think it's, I mean, in some ways, if you run into someone like a Socrates, he is, you know, he is a shortcut. But in being a shortcut, what happens is you're 19, Socrates is 60. I mean, it's true that you know, you get to where Socrates wants you to go very, very quickly. But you also miss a lot of experiences. As Gurdjieff would say, experiences create personality, you know. And you need personality because later on in life, you need to go back and figure out how you've been shaped, why you've been shaped, you know, what have been the influences in your life. And that matures you intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, you know. What you have in a shortcut is that you have so little personality and you have a huge essence. You know, you have huge understanding as to how life works, but you've never been in life.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the age of 60, now you enter life and you realize life really sucks. You know, the problem with that is that at the age of 60, you want companionship. You know, you want some sort of physical stability, but your intellect just ruins everything for you. You know, and so you need someone who kind of you know, you have your job, you have your marriage, your relationship. You also have your relationship with Gurdjieff. And if you happen to be Gurdjieff, you're not going to tell anybody to quit your job. You're not going to tell anybody to walk out of your marriage because they all have their own importance, you know. And their importance will kind of be revealed to you much, much later in life, you know. You're married and you're very intense and you have all these emotional highs when it comes to, say, your spiritual, you know, pursuits. And then you keep saying, I'm going to leave my husband, or I'm going to leave my wife, or I don't want to be around them as much. And then if you happen to be around the right people, they'll keep telling you, you know, stay there. You don't really know what you're talking about right now. I know you're high. Stay in it, you know. And then you realize they get to be 55 or 60 and, you know, emotionally they're worn out, physically they're worn out, intellectually they're worn out. And they can't be as intense as they used to be. And when you're at that stage, what you need is a place that grounds you, makes you feel comfortable, you know. Then you say, oh, well, I think that's my husband. And I haven't seen him for a long time, but you know what? He's such a nice guy. Or my wife, or my dog, or my cat. Because in some ways, I think good teachers like Gurdjieff is like a psychic who can predict, for the most part, accurately how the future is going to unfold for you. And they certainly don't want you to be paralyzed, you know, because the truth is, any good teacher invests a good amount of who and what they are. They put all that stuff inside their student. And when a student falls apart, it's like they themselves fall apart, you know. And so they try to protect all these different areas of life, you know. So, yeah. But you know, the problem with emotions is that if you're not careful, and if someone is giving you the wrong kind of emotions, we go back to Lula's questions, because those emotions, if they're not protected, controlled, they can really turn into trauma. And then you will never gain objectivity. You will never be a rational creature. You'll always be an emotional junkie. You'll be a poison to yourself and other people. You know. I mean, so much of, you know, what we've talked about really tonight has to do with where you are in life and the sort of influences that you've had in your life, and because they help you interpret the experiences, you know. And it's such a difficult thing to change those interpretations. And so then everything becomes a joke.